Well, good morning. Good morning to everyone who's joining us, and good morning to Gen Zamling. Thank you for doing this. I'm going to do an introduction about Gen Zamling in one moment, but just to let you know, there is a comment section. If you would like, it's over to the right-hand side. If anyone has a question at any point, please feel free to put it in the comment section. You can certainly put something there just to let us know you're here. We'd love to hear from you. And so let me introduce you to our guest, and then I'll explain a little bit about what we have planned for this morning. So this is Gen Zamling, just a lovely human, I have to say. He is the resident teacher at Kadampa Meditation Center, Chicago. He's a modern Buddhist monk. He's been a student of the Venerable Geshe Kelsang Gyatso for many years.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, you'd think with my last name it would be, and has taught in the United States and in the UK. Gen Zamling completed an intensive 6-month special teacher training program with their general spiritual director, Gen La Kelsang Dekyang.
Very well. Very good.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. To further his qualifications as a teacher, he is well loved by his students, which I have absolutely heard that you are well loved by your students. So I'm very glad to have you here in part for that reason. And he sets an immaculate example of someone who has taken Buddha's teachings to heart. Gen Zamling is known for his practical approach, warmth, and clarity. So good morning and welcome.
Good morning. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me, Margo. And you did an excellent job pronouncing those names. They're not easy.
By the fourth time we do something. Maybe
That's right. That's right.
Rolling off my tongue. So part of what we're doing today, and you've been so gracious to agree to do this because, you lead classes, you lead meditation, you've been at this for quite a while. And I can say as a therapist and just as a mental health practitioner that, first of all, I recommend and suggest that people explore meditation on a regular basis, or just mindfulness or quiet or sitting still, or, whatever sort of language seems to work for them. And for a lot of folks, it still remains kind of a mystery about what this is. They feel like they're not doing it right. That's probably the number one thing that I see, is that people feel like they're not doing it properly. And so therefore they feel, like, well, why bother? I can't do this. I don't do it right. I can't clear my mind. I just had this conversation with someone yesterday, and he said, well, welcome to the club. I think that's kind of the point. That's just part of what happens. So I thought it would be wonderful if we could just have a conversation where you help us understand what is meditation and how do we do it? Mm-hmm. What can we actually expect? I don't know that we'll have time to do any actual meditation today. We'll see how it goes, but maybe another time if we don't have time today. But I really wanted people to be able to understand more about what this is, how to do it, and how to incorporate it into their lives so that they can really reap some of the rewards and benefits of this kind of practice.
Fantastic. Well, those are excellent questions. And I have to say that I get similar questions when I mention to people that I teach meditation. And I think I mentioned to you previously that sometimes when I do mention that, people say, oh yeah, I tried that once. Right. Sort of with the expectation that they should be good at it from the beginning. And so I think one thing to maybe think about at the beginning is, like you're asking, what is meditation? I think for us to feel successful in doing it, we need to know what it is that we're doing. And so, I, as a Buddhist and as a Buddhist meditation teacher, I'm presenting everything from the point of view of Buddhism. But even within Buddhism, there's lots of diversity with respect to how to meditate and what meditation is. So I'm presenting, I think, a viewpoint that'll be accessible to anyone, regardless of your background. So we teach that meditation is a method to make our mind peaceful and calm. Overall, sort of as an overall idea, meditation is a method. Like, we could say it's even scientific in its approach. And so I think that word scientific is quite interesting because normally we think of science as being something very external, like physics, biology, the social sciences, and so on. But in terms of meditation, if we understand it to be scientific in its approach, what we mean by that is that's something that we can investigate. We can start to understand, observe, test even, to start to come to some educated hypotheses about our mind and sort of test and then try to understand who we are within. And so I think as modern day people, we like science. We believe in science. We have some confidence in science. And that confidence generally has to do with external things. But what if we were to turn that lens that's usually looking at the external world and point that inward and start to understand how our mind works? I think for most people, we're sort of intrinsically interested in our mind and in minds in general, and we like to understand how people tick. And so meditation is overall, we can say, a method to make our mind peaceful and calm. But I would say that's sort of the first step. And so understanding that we can go far, far deeper than just experiencing a little bit of stress relief or a little bit of escape from some of the busyness in our own mind. So I think from that point of view, we can approach meditation with an attitude of curiosity rather than judgment, which is really easy to do when we are trying to meditate. I don't know if you're anything like this, but most people I run into are sort of perfectionistic in nature. We're sort of no, not at all, right? We're all sort of our own worst critics, and so it's quite possible to start meditating and feel unsuccessful right from the beginning. And so, like you said, we stop right away. And so I think bringing an approach of curiosity and inquisitiveness is a really nice, light way to approach meditation from the beginning. It's trying to get our attitude a little bit lighter, a little bit more enjoyable, rather than sort of, am I doing this right? Sort of like what you were talking about. So that's one answer to this question of what meditation is. It's a method to make our mind peaceful and calm. I think it's also a method to transform our mind. It's a method to deeply transform our mind at the deepest levels. So one thing I can contribute is, we could talk about this all day. These are two wonderful questions. The one thing that we can start by addressing is the question, am I, and sort of are people at large, intrinsically good or intrinsically flawed?
It's a great question. What a great framework, right?
Am I intrinsically good or am I intrinsically flawed? And within the Buddhist perspective, Buddhist psychology, we understand that human beings and all living beings, by extension, are intrinsically good, which means that we have this potential for unlimited inner development. And we call this progression of mental developments a path, a spiritual path, an inner path. And so within the sort of vehicle of Buddhist practice, we have sort of stages of meditation practice that we can engage in to sort of not only tap into, but then develop this inner goodness within us. And one way we can start to understand that we are intrinsically good is by connecting to some peace of mind. And I think it's really helpful, and I would say essential at the beginning, if we're a new meditator, to think one of my main jobs is to try to see how peaceful I can make my mind. How often can I make my mind peaceful and calm? So lots of ways we can do that. We can do that through breathing meditation, which is a standard sort of preliminary meditation that we learn. We can practice breathing meditation anytime. We can spend 5 or 10 minutes simply focusing on the sensation of your breathing. And so, you mentioned briefly that sometimes we think meditation is about clearing our mind. From our point of view, clearing our mind is not only very difficult, I don't know if you've ever tried that, but it's exceedingly hard to do because our mind is always sort of churned up with lots of different thoughts. But we have this natural function of our mind is to be focusing. It's called the mental factor attention. Our mind is always attentive to something. And so instead of thinking about lots of different things or being distracted by many different things, in breathing meditation, we try to channel the enormous power of our mind onto one thing, just one thing, and that being the breath. And for those of you who've tried that before, it's easier said than done, because our mind is constantly wanting, it has this habit of wandering to all sorts of different distracting thoughts, sounds, and so on. However, with a bit of persistence, if we can keep coming back to our breath and holding our attention to our breathing, what happens is all of the superfluous, all the extraneous thoughts that are normally sort of crowding out our mind start to dissipate. And what we connect to, what we start to experience directly, is our own peace of mind. And so breathing meditation, for me, is one of the best places to start. We can do it for 5 or 10 minutes and just practice bringing our mind back to the breath and trying to hold our attention there for as long as we can. And maybe it's only a few moments at first. But we'll notice, for as long as I'm paying attention to my breathing and I'm single pointed, even if that single pointedness is just for half a breath or a breath or two, other thoughts can't arise. Because our mind can only focus on, we talk about being a multitasker sometimes, and that we are sort of constantly thinking about many different things. But in truth, our mind can only focus on one thing at a time. And sometimes we can dart back and forth between many different things. But what we're learning in meditation is that if we can keep our mind focused on one thing, the breath, our other thoughts will dissipate and dissolve. And then we start to experience some peace right away. And that initial experience of peace we call happiness. Believe it or not, that initial experience of peace, that's the foundation of authentic happiness. So the more that we can connect to that initial experience of peace, we start to discover for ourselves, I have a source of peace and goodness already within me. And so then there is the process of meditation that develops an insight. We develop some wisdom insight about the nature of ourself, which is I have this capacity for enormous peace, which then I can grow on, I can add to.
And it's built in. It's already installed.
That's right. We come born with it. Absolutely.
We come born with it. Yeah, I love that idea. You really can't be, it's just in part, it's physics. This is maybe mental physics, but you can't be in two places at once. Two things can't occupy the same space at the same time, that sort of thing. So if we're able to just do that practice of bringing our awareness back, and it really is a practice, right? And as you said, we do have the innate capacity, but we do have to practice and understand that we have, those little monkeys are jumping, little monkey thoughts are jumping from branch to branch to branch. And, I think of it as just mischief making. My mind likes to make some mischief sometimes and, maybe be a little more playful with it than thoughts are the enemy and I've got to be still. And, it's like, oh, there's the mischief again.
That's right. Yep. That's a really nice perspective to take. And I noticed Gertrude made a comment that we're both good and flawed. And I think maybe you're referring to my initial question about are we intrinsically good or intrinsically flawed? And that's a nice answer, because I think that's probably how most people would answer, is that we're both. We have a bit of both within us. And, those flawed parts, in Buddhism, we call delusions. So any part of our mind, any aspect of our mind that is unpeaceful or out of control, we call delusions. And there are lots of different ones, like frustration and anger is an example of a delusion. We don't mean delusion in like the probably in the same way that you might use that, Margo, but it is a broader term that we would use for any type of mind that is in which we've lost our peace and we don't have as much control over what we have to say or do. And so the flawed parts of us, we'd say, are these deluded mental habits like anger, like uncontrolled desire, which give rise in some people to things like addiction, and also our lack of wisdom. So we can say our ignorance or confusion. So all of these are also, we would say, inborn, we're born with them, but they're not intrinsically part of our mind, meaning they are habits. They're strong habits. So anger is a strong habit that we have, unfortunately. Craving desire is a strong habit that we have, unfortunately. But like all bad habits, they can be weakened and eventually overcome. And so if we have an authentic method to do that, and in Buddhist practice, we have lots of methods to recognize, reduce, and then finally remove those. We call them root delusions, because they're like the root forces in our mind that create all of our mental hardship. And they also push us in many ways to perform actions or be a sort of person who creates a lot of problems for oneself and others. So while we might identify ourselves as having both good parts and flawed parts, from a Buddhist perspective, deeper still, the positive parts can't be destroyed. They are, we can say, embedded in our mind, embedded in who we are, whereas our delusions, as strong as they may be, and as tenacious as they may be, they are not an intrinsic part of our mind. And so we can say, through our practice of meditation, eventually the good will triumph over our difficult states of mind.
Oh, I love that. And I love that concept of delusions. And yes, it's different than a psychological, typical sort of Western psychological way of thinking about delusions, sort of. We tend to think of that as something that someone who has a chemical imbalance and has a psychotic disorder experiences, but it's seeing things that really aren't there. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's probably where the threat is. It's what's happening. It's the concept of over there, over here. I mean, you can obviously explain that infinitely better than I can, but that does it exist in us or does it exist out here? And being able to make that distinction of, wow, the reason I'm feeling really crummy is the way I'm experiencing this, the way I'm holding this internally. And I actually have choice about that. I have options. Yes, this thing occurred. Well, that was so that was a little punctuation on that one. But I think that's kind of a wonderful concept of being able to hold. It's not the reality that this was horrible. It's the way I end up holding it in myself. And perhaps you can speak better to that, but I love that concept.
Yeah, no, you're right on. I think that's a really nice way of putting it. That from a very profound way, Buddha said that our mind creates our experience. Oftentimes we feel like we're in the world, and all of us are in the world as something, like you said, something separate from us, something out there, independent of us. But quite literally, Buddha said that, that our whole experience of reality is an experience of mind. So if you ask yourself the simple question, am I having a good day or a bad day? The answer to that depends upon the state of your mind, the quality of your mind. Less important or less significant is what's actually happening to us, right? So maybe lots of difficult things are happening to us, but if we have a positive mind, despite those difficult outer difficulties, we may not say that we have a problem. We may say, yeah, I had a challenging day today, or it was difficult, but I'm okay. So in that sense, because we had some peace in our mind, we had some stability in our mind, then the day was okay. Or we can say by extension, if we can string together multiple days like that, where our mind can remain stable and calm, then even though outer problems are going to happen throughout our life, we're able to, we understand that our life is actually a reflection or sort of like a mirror of our mind. And with a positive mind,
Yeah.
we are experiencing a more positive world, a more positive
Mhm.
life. So that's wonderful. We can say if we were to develop that to the full, if I were to develop a completely pure mind, then what sort of world would I live in?
Right, right. What kind of world do I get to live in?
Yeah,
Right. I
exactly.
mean, the ability to believe that we can't, because we can't. I say to people all the time when I'm working with them, they'll say, "I have too much stress in my life. I have to get rid of the stress." And I'll say, "Well, we can't do that necessarily, but we can try to manage our stress response." And this is part of that. Is it's the perception of what's occurring and the perspective taking, and having a way to hold it to see that it really is how I am sitting with what's occurring and where am I choosing to let myself sit with my experience.
Exactly. And also with difficult circumstances, if we have a method, and I'm sure you do this a lot with people that you work with, is that if we have a method to reframe or understand that difficult experience, we can actually grow as a person as a result of those adversities in our life. And I would say, in order to keep some level of sanity and some level of buoyancy in our mind, I think as adults, we realize that we need to be able to do that because,
Mm.
we were talking before we started, there are just so many things happening in our world right now that, you can understand why most people would feel hurt, disappointed, frustrated, enraged, depressed, all sorts of reactions. But if we can stand back a little bit and have a little bit of wisdom to think, okay, what is all of this teaching me from a spiritual point of view? Is it helping me develop my compassion, for instance? Is it helping me to develop my empathy for others? Is it helping me to become more tolerant, more wise, less, more content? These sorts of things. And in truth, those difficult things that are happening around us and perhaps to us don't have to be intrinsically uh, problematic. They can be something that we can actually use to grow as a person,
Mhm.
and then maybe become a source of inspiration for others because they're noticing that, hey, you're not upset by all this that's going on, and maybe you have some wise counsel that you can give to them because you're starting to turn these sorts of things into a process of inner development.
Mhm. Yeah, there's opportunity in that for us, which
Mhm.
is, part of what's wonderful. So we have about 7 minutes left, Gen Zamling, and so I want to make sure because I think folks might be curious how do they get started?
Mhm.
Because this sounds wonderful. I mean, from what you're describing, who doesn't want that, right? How do we go about beginning to get there?
Great. So thank you for that question. So I think I can think of really two things for the absolute beginner. And the first is to try to spend a little bit of time each day if you can. I know it might sound like a lot at the beginning, but if you can, more often than not, to try to spend a little bit of time either in the morning or in the evening doing just a little bit of breathing meditation. And it can be 2 minutes, it can be 5 minutes. I would definitely suggest not more than 10 if you're a newcomer to meditation. And you can sit in a chair like I'm sitting in a chair right now, close your eyes, and just I think it's good to start with a good intention and ask yourself, why am I meditating right now? Why do I need to meditate? Probably our answer is like you're saying, I've been really stressed, I'm worried about this or that. So our intention can be, I want to reduce my stress, or I want to reduce my worry. Or maybe there are people in our life who are having some difficulty and you think, I need to meditate for them as well. I need to sort of improve myself so I can be a better person for them, so I can help them as well. So in Buddhism, we say that our intention matters a lot. So the reason why we're meditating, we try to develop a good motivation for doing so. And then once we've set our intention, then we can close our eyes and just relax. Let your body relax. Use your breath, breathe out, and let your body relax as much as you can. And then focus as you breathe in and out through your nose. Try simply to pay attention to the sensation or the feeling of your breathing. And it's just that simple. We're just trying to bring our full awareness, our full attention to the breath and try to make that our main focus. But as we know, and if any of you have tried it at home, you know that our mind is naturally going to wander to lots of different things. It's going to be very busy. And so the idea here, what I'd like to say is that when your mind is busy, when you notice that, please be happy that you noticed that your mind was busy. And why do I say that? Because if you notice that your mind is busy, then you can bring it back to your breath. But if you never notice your mind is busy, maybe the shopping list has come to mind and you're going through, oh, don't forget to pick up this or that. At that point, we're not meditating anymore. We're thinking about our shopping list. But if we can notice it, oh, I'm thinking about my shopping list, I'm not meditating right now, then I can come back, right? So it sounds like a small thing, but it's actually quite a big thing in meditation, is being able to notice that we're distracted. So that's going to happen many, many times over the course of our meditation, which is that our mind is going to be constantly wandering. So that's why I think if we keep it to just a couple minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, we're building up the skill to bring our mind back and try to hold it to the breath. And so then maybe we just do that for a minute or 2 minutes. And then we dedicate that meditation to our own peace of mind, to world peace, to people in our life maybe who are struggling somehow. So if our mind relaxes a little bit, we can enjoy that peace at the end of our meditation. So whenever our mind calms down a little bit, the breath is just leading us to it's a entryway or doorway into an experience of peace. And that's really the main thing that we're trying to get to by focusing on the breath. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Good.
Yeah.
Then the other thing that I was just going to say is, out of meditation, whenever your mind feels relaxed or comfortable, i.e. not tense, not frustrated, not deluded, you can be just relaxing at home, reading a book, or having a cup of tea, or your morning coffee, whatever it happens to be. We just notice if our mind feels relaxed. You're not doing any formal meditation, but your mind feels okay. Notice that peace within. It's a simple thing that we can do, but what often happens is people think I'm not a peaceful person, or I'm a very stressed person, mainly because we're constantly focusing on how unpeaceful we are. Right? So if we take the time, and Wendy just asked a question, how do we sustain that feeling of peace through repeated practice? Absolutely. And so the point that I'm making here is that, so maybe we have a little bit of peace in meditation, we've connected to that peace, and then every so often during the day, maybe you're driving somewhere and you're stopped at a stoplight. You can use that stoplight, keep your eyes open, but you can connect with your breath again and try to reconnect to some peace. So we're trying to maintain a continuum of practice, Wendy. We're trying to keep it as so-called like meditating during our daily life by trying to come back to that peace. And that can be as simple as noticing some enjoyment or some peace within when we're doing something else. Maybe we're enjoying some time with our kids or something like this. And we're just like, aha, I've connected again to some peace. And that is, broadly speaking, a practice of meditation.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I love that. Extending it throughout the day. It doesn't have to be carrying around your pillow and sitting in a particular position, or, it doesn't have to include all of that. It's helpful to have some of that in your practice, but also it's just little touchstones throughout the day of recognizing peace. And that's reconnecting and kind of following the thread of what meditation is intended to do. That's wonderful. So we just have 1 minute left. So can you just tell us a little bit about the Kadampa Center before we have to sign off? This has been really wonderful. This is exactly what I was hoping for. So thank you. So how can people connect with you more to get more of this with you?
Great question. So we do live stream classes. Obviously, we're still closed, but we do live stream classes 7 days a week. Our website is meditateinchicago.org. Meditateinchicago.org. And if you go there, you can see who we are, what we do, and our whole list of classes. We do, and it's open to absolutely anyone. You don't need any previous experience. You don't need to be Buddhist. We're not going to convert you to Buddhism. Don't worry about that. It's all about just helping people learn how to become happy through meditation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this. Much, much appreciated. I hope people will reach out. And will you continue some of the live stream events even after things open up? You know, I keep hearing from people, what happens in phase 4 now? Does that? So yes, you will continue. People can access it from their homes if need be.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Yep. And it looks like someone from our office just posted your website, meditateinchicago.org. It's there on the screen. Thank you for those of you who have let us know that you're here. Again, future questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm Dr. Margo Jacquot. I'm the owner and director of the Juniper Center. We're a mental health practice throughout the Chicagoland area, and we're here to help if you have something that's that kind of need. We serve people from all age groups. Our youngest client is 3, and our oldest is 102. So and I love the idea of incorporating, especially right now in these times, more meditation practice and mindfulness and peace, because we all need it. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for joining us. Perhaps at some point, Gen Zamling will be generous and come back and lead us through more meditation. I would love that myself. So selfishly, I will advocate for that. And our website is down at the bottom there too, if you need it. So thank you all very much. Be well. Have a great weekend. We hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.